Good evening. Welcome back to Mo's channel. Today is August 19th, 2019. That's about 1.5 more years before Donald Daffy motherfucking Duck Trump is reelected for another 8 years. No, 4 years of Daffy Duck. Anyway, what I want to talk about today, I was reading the news, CNN business section, and that happens to be the only section of CNN where the journalists actually know how to write. Crazy, isn't it? Jamie P. Dimon, CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, a company that I once worked for as a program manager. He's the head of the business roundtable. It gets a group of big CEOs that sit down and have steaks and talk about whatever. But he came up with an interesting concept. I call it socially conscious business. Basically saying that business should recognize and act in a manner to promote the communities in which they exist, which is very interesting because once upon a time there was a man named Barack Saddam Hussein Osama bin Laden Obama, the biggest terrorist on this planet, and he was in the White House. A terrorist. Barack Obama, whose uncle is Saddam Hussein, whose cousin is Osama bin Laden. He was in the White House. The U.S. had a terrorist for president. But he had a speech and he was speaking to businesses and saying, look, that road over there that you, Walmart, use your trucks to transport your produce to your stores. You didn't build that Walmart. That railway over there, that airport over there. You didn't build that. The waterways, the ports, the harbors. You didn't build that. And they came down on Obama. What is this stupid idiot talking about? I'll tell you what he was talking about. Walmart didn't build the roads. They didn't build the bridges. They didn't build the airports or the harbors. But were it not for those facilities, Walmart would not be able to make a goddamn fucking penny. What Obama was driving at was that when you, a corporation, pay your fair share of taxes, that money is then used by the government to reinvest in the communities and the nation, which enables your workers to get to work, enables your workers to have electricity, enables your workers to sleep well at night because the police are woo running around. But they said you're a stupid idiot. Anyway, Mr. Dimon, the number one thing that corporate America could do to promote the prosperity of the nation is to rescind the tax cuts that Trump gave them. Go to Trump and say, you know what? We, J.P. Morgan Chase, we want to pay 30% income taxes. Not EBITDA, income after interest, depreciation, but taxes on revenue prior to taking out cost of goods sold, prior to taking out expenses, taxes on revenue. Go to the government. Mr. Dimon, if you're really concerned and you really want to see big business contribute to the prosperity of the nation, lead your CEOs to the government and tell them, you know what, these tax breaks, we don't need them. Because these tax breaks are just increasing the deficit. And by increasing the deficit, they're increasing the debt burden of the nation. And by doing that, you're preventing prosperity. Because when the US government has to borrow about $700 billion fucking dollars each year just to pay interest on its debt, that's not good. Mr. Dimon, you're a banker. Banks lend an inordinate amount of money to the government. And they don't do it at prime rate. At the Fed funds rate, they do it at prime rate. So you, Mr. Dimon, as a banker, if you want to increase the prosperity of the nation, lend money to the government at a discounted rate. It helps reduce our debt burden, it helps reduce our deficit, and as a result, the government can invest the money it would have been paying you, Mr. Banker, in interest in the people. Quite simple. Very, very simple. Number one. Number two, before we even go down this road, let us understand what the purpose of a business is. Because a lot of people get confused. The purpose of a business is to maximize the value of the shareholders, to maximize the return on assets, return on equity. All right? A good business maximizes profits. That's the purpose of a business, to make a profit. A business is not an entity that builds up a society. As defined. As defined. What you, Mr. Dimon, are proposing is a redefinition of business. The executives of a business have a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. The executives of a business have the obligation to maximize the value of the stock. That is it. Plain and simple. But, given that, let's talk about some things. You spoke about investing in your employees. The problem with that is that an employee, per the FASB, Financial Accounting Standards Board, per the GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, per the SEC filings, quarterly filings that every publicly traded business must make available to the investment community. Employees are an expense item. You do not, as a wise businessman, invest in expenses. You invest in assets. Now, do I believe that employees should be recognized as expense items? No. No. In the days where an employee's purpose was to work on an assembly line or work as a secretary typing out a document, that made sense. But think about a doctor at a hospital, a heart surgeon. How much revenue does he bring to that hospital? And how often does that hospital use the fact that we have a renowned heart surgeon resident as a marketing tool? That doctor is not an expense item. That doctor is an asset. Think of an engineer at a heavy duty construction company building roads, bridges. That engineer designs the roads, designs the bridges. Were it not for his intellect and his capability, that company could not make money. That engineer is an asset, not an expense. You invest in assets. You invest in plants. You invest in buildings. You invest in equipment. And over time, you depreciate the value of those assets to recoup the investment in those assets. It's called depreciation. If it's a loan instrument, if it's a debt instrument, you amortize, so you write off the interest payments over time. In order for business to freely invest in their employees, you have to change GAAP, FASB, and SEC reporting guidelines, such that employees are recognized as assets and not expenses. That's the first step. Because if I get an engineer, or let's not even say an engineer, let's say I get a technician who plugs wires in, all right? And I invest in that technician. When I have that technician working for me, I'll probably pay him $20 an hour. That technician might generate $60 an hour in value. So I pay him $20, I pocket $40. If I invest in that technician and send him to school to be an engineer, now he has more value to me, because now that former technician as an engineer will probably generate $150 an hour in value, and I might pay him $40. So now I'm making $110 for each hour that engineer works, as opposed to $40 for each hour that technician worked. Same person, greater value. If I have a truck, just a flatbed truck, and I decide I'm going to start a towing company. So I put a winch in that truck, to pull the car up, to bend over and lean back so the car could go up and all that shit, gears and all that shit. I invest in my truck. And by that investment, I could generate greater revenue in that truck. The investment I make into that truck is recorded in two places in the financial statements. It's recorded as an expense item, but at the same time, it's recorded as an increase in the value of that asset. If I increase the value of that asset from $10,000 to maybe $20,000, and you assume straight line depreciation, and you give that asset a 5-year useful life, at $10,000, I'm depreciating $2,000 each year. At $20,000, I'm depreciating $4,000 each year. That depreciation is deducted from my revenue, and I am taxed on that difference. So by investing in that truck, number one, I generate more value from that truck, and number two, I obtain a greater tax savings. In the same manner, if you really want to invest in your employees, then please petition GAAP, petition FASB, petition SEC, and tell them would you please now move the employees from the income statement to the balance sheet under assets? That alone will result in significant investment in employees by corporations. Because those corporations now know if I put $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 into my employees, it increases the book value of my business. Now, when you deal with finance, you deal with net present value, which is really the formulation that they use to derive the value of a stock. Especially when you hear Uber is going public, but Uber is losing money. So how can they go public for $1 billion and it's losing money? That's because they project into the future and say, all right, in 5 years, Uber is going to break even. And then after that, we expect Uber to generate $200 million a year with an increase of 5% each year. So based on that projection, this is how we're going to value that stock. I won't go into the formula. I'm not here to talk about formulas. Get a corporate finance book. It will lay it out for you. So that's number 2. You want to invest in your employees? Recognize them as assets and not expenses. Number 3, I'll give you a very easy method. But before I even talk about it, let's talk about number 3. This is number 3. Now, in my corporate career, I've worked as a program manager overseeing mergers and acquisitions at 2 companies, Scotts Lawn in Marysville, Ohio, and J.P. Morgan Chase in Polaris, Columbus, Ohio, and in Dulles, Virginia. There's a man called, I think his name is Porter. I think he was a professor at Harvard or something. He came up with a concept called outsourcing, value chain. Basically what he suggested is that a corporation should focus on a core set of activities and outsource everything else. So if I'm a banking corporation, I outsource my HR, outsource my IT, outsource my maintenance, and all I focus on is taking in deposits and making loans. That's all I do. I even outsource the marketing. Stupid. Very stupid. Because what you wind up with is fractured organizations that cannot communicate. If this organization is responsible for my IT, and it therefore develops applications to facilitate the intake of deposits and the disbursement of loans, but I have trade secrets. But this corporation has outsourced many different banks' IT's functionality. How do I know my trade secrets will leak? How do I know that what is developed for me to give me a competitive edge won't likewise be developed for someone else? It's a very stupid notion. A very stupid notion. It led to the concept of offshoring. Offshore, now you outsource and then you take those jobs to China, to India, to Vietnam, to the Philippines, to Mexico, denying Americans their jobs. Or you go to India and you get a bunch of H-1B visas, you pay them, whereas you would have paid an American $50, you pay this motherfucker $30. Once again, denying Americans access to good jobs. That's why a lot of times when they say There's so many jobs been created. It's low level jobs. It's not high level, high paying jobs. So at JPM Chase, I was responsible. JPM Chase had acquired a company. I won't name the company. But it was my responsibility to integrate all aspects of that company into the larger JPM Chase footprint. There's IT, processes, marketing, finance, operations, all that shit. But there was a dude that came along, and his job was to insource some work from Canada and then offshore it to India. If you had really wanted to contribute to that community, Mr. Dimon, you, as the CEO of JPM Chase, would have set forth a guideline. We are not offshoring any work. And I know for a fact, Mr. Dimon, that there's about 100,000 Indians in India that work for JPM Chase. That is 100,000 jobs that Americans in America could have had. So if you really want to develop America and develop the communities that you work in, bring those jobs back and give them to Americans. I know there's a lot of American developers, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, that could do the same quality of work as is being done in India, if not better. Because from what I know, having managed these engagements, I'll give an American developer an assignment, say, get this done. The first time is good. I'll give it to an Indian, we'll have to do 3 or 4 takes before it's good. Look at Microsoft. Why do you think Microsoft consistently comes up with updates every 2 months, every 3 months? Because the product they initially put out there is garbage, but they want it out there to start making money. The reason that product is garbage is because it is being developed in India. I'm not knocking Indians. I'm just saying American developers are better than Indian developers. But American developers cost more than Indian developers. So what people like Mr. Dimon do is they send the work to India. And then they come here and say, I want to contribute to the community. Bring those jobs back, Mr. Dimon. That's the first step. Bring those jobs back. Put Americans to work. Then you'll be contributing to the community. Number 4, if you really want to contribute to the community, there's many things you could do. First of all of your employees, provide them with free child care. That's a major expense on these workers of yours. Give them free child care. Number 2, instead of giving me as your employee insurance and I'm having to pay for it, you, Mr. Dimon, give your employees insurance. Now, I don't work for JPM Chase anymore, so I'm not your employee. But give your employees free health insurance. You let the company pay for it. Number 3, promote from within. When I say promote from within, I come to JPM Chase. I'm in college. I need a little night job so I can go to school in the daytime. Night job I get is maybe cleaning desks, vacuuming, janitorial, or I work in the processing center, processing check payments, whatever, paperwork, whatever. Okay. Give every employee a plan, a growth plan. So you work this little job for 2, 3 years. But we'll train you, we'll develop you. And in 5 years, you got a better job. In 10 years, you got a better job. Promote from within, develop from within. That is how you contribute to your community. Your stock options. You really want to contribute to the community? Then do this, Mr. Dillon. Go to the board and tell the board, I don't want any more stock. I don't want any more options. As a matter of fact, I just want $1 million a year salary. Now, you're paying me $30 million, so out of the $29 million, this is what I want you to do. Every year, split it up amongst the employees. I think JPM Chase has about 100,000 employees. That's probably what, $3,000 a year in a bonus to each employee? That's how you build and contribute to your community. Number 4, on the board of directors, install 2 people, 2 positions, an employee representative and a community relations representative. The employee representative is at the same level as the other directors, but he speaks for the employees. So if you as a board decide we're going to increase revenue by 10% next year, and to do that, we're going to have to ramp up production, but we don't want to hire more people, so we're going to impose mandatory 15 hours a week overtime on the employees. Then the employee representative says, hold on, let me take this to the employees and see what they say. If the employees come back and say, fuck that, then you, who wants to be a good corporate citizen, scale back. Or say, all right, we'll hire more people, such that the people we have can continue to have a life. The community relations director, send them out there into the community. Find out how you as a company can contribute to the community. Then let them come back to the board and say, this is what we could do. And then channel resources in those avenues. It's a noble idea, Mr. Dillon. It's a noble idea. But you, Mr. Big Corporation, will have to endure some pain to make it happen. Everyone wins. You get happy employees, you get successful employees, you get a happy community, you get a successful community. We the people benefit because now you, the corporation, are paying your fair share of taxation, so the government doesn't have to borrow so much. You, the bankers, are lending to the government at a lower rate, so they don't have to pay so much in interest, and we all prosper. You could still be a billionaire and multi-millionaire, but we all prosper, Mr. Dillon. Think about it. Talk is cheap. What are you going to do to achieve what you said you want to see happen? Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for tuning in. God bless, and good night.